This footage shows the last public appearance of Steve Jobs, 4 months before his death. He speaks to the Cupertino City Council to reveal one final project.
Apple's growing like a weed. And as you know, we've always been in Cupertino. Started in a little office park and eventually got the buildings we are in now at the corner of De Anza and 280.
The previous so-called Apple campus was no longer big enough for the growing company. The buildings, constructed in 1993, are arranged along a circular private road, Infinite Loop, named after a programming term for a code that will run endlessly by itself. In order to cope with the growing number of employees, the company started acquiring more and more buildings in the area. Eventually, Apple was operating out of a chaotic mix of buildings that were originally developed entirely separately from one another and are by no means ideal for a coherent office headquarters.
So we're renting buildings, not very good buildings either, at an ever greater radius from our campus. And it's clear that we need to build a new campus.
The plan was not to abandon the existing campus at Infinite Loop, but to expand it with a larger, modern one. Apple was able to acquire a large piece of land that is not only located nearby, but also sits directly on Interstate 280, which runs through the entire Silicon Valley, offering good accessibility for employees. A large part of this area was for sale because the computer company Hewlett-Packard closed their offices here, and Steve Jobs personally came full circle by acquiring this site, as it was somewhat personal to him.
When I was 13, I think, I called up, Hewlett-Packard were my idols, and I called up Bill Hewlett because he lived in Palo Alto, and he picked up the phone, and I talked to him, and I asked him if he'd give me some spare parts for something I was building called a frequency counter. And he did, but in addition to that, he gave me something way more important. He gave me a job that summer, a summer job at Hewlett-Packard, right here in Santa Clara off 280, the division that built frequency counters. And I was in heaven. Well, right around that exact moment in time, Hewlett and Packard themselves were walking on some property over here in Cupertino, in Prune Ridge, and they ended up buying it. And they built their computer systems division there. And as Hewlett-Packard has been shrinking lately, they decided to sell that property, and we bought it.
Apple hired the design studio Foster & Partners by British architect Norman Foster, one of the most influential contemporary architects in the world. Foster's career initially took off in the 1970s when he made his name by creating machine-influenced buildings that borrowed industrial design elements for a modernist look. Over the decades, his style has evolved, and his newer buildings feature less harsh elements but an evolving modern aesthetic. His buildings display a functional modernity, a good fit as his design approach is akin to Apple's own product philosophy. In designing the new Apple campus, Foster worked closely with Steve Jobs, who had a very personal vision for the project, and Johnny Ive, then Apple's chief design officer, who, having worked at Apple since the late 90s, was about as renowned in the field of product design as Foster was in the field of architecture. It was the beginning of a special partnership of exceptional talents.
We've seen these office parks with lots of buildings, and they get pretty boring pretty fast. So we'd like to do something better than that. And the campus we'd like to build there is one building that holds 12,000 people.
The final complex is called Apple Park, and it is characterized by its centerpiece, a single ring-shaped building surrounded by vast parkland. And while the campus itself is the result of a unique collaboration, the building is designed to enable exactly these types of collaborations. The parks should invite employees who may work in completely different parts of the building to cross paths and exchange ideas. The circular building is divided into 9 sections, each connected by a light-filled atrium. And although the building as a whole offers an enormous amount of space, due to the ring shape, it is not overwhelmingly large at any individual point. Within the individual segments, walkways lead around the building along the outer and inner rims. These walkways are separated from the outside only by a continuous wall made of glass that stretches from the floor to the ceiling, allowing a panoramic view of the surroundings. Apple claims that these are the largest curved glass panels used in any building to date. And sticking out from the facade are white canopies, positioned to cast shade at the interior hallways. In addition, these elements are also part of the building's active ventilation system, bringing fresh air in from the outside. The office space is also kept very open, with glass walls laying out an open pot design. In this concept, the employees are given access to a large open floor plan where they can self-locate to available desks. This layout should increase collaboration and is inspired by co-working spaces and college campuses. But this vision of a modern working environment clashes with reality in many places. There are reports that some of Apple's employees dislike the open pod concept, with programmers struggling to concentrate in this new setup. Another place where employees come together is the central cafeteria. It is a single lunchroom for the entire building. The light-filled space that rises from the floor to the roof, offering a massive open room, is intended as yet another meeting space. And along the outer wall, there are 2 giant glass doors that can be opened to allow the interior of the building to flow seamlessly into the exterior landscape. When it came to the design of the parks, it was important to Steve Jobs that the landscape is a reflection of the California landscape he grew up around. The new campus is not only close to the previous campus, but also not far from where everything started for Jobs. His childhood home, where he assembled the first Apple computers together with Steve Wozniak in 1976. More than 30 years later, in addition to the immense global influence the company has exerted, Apple has also become a fundamental part of the local environment in which Steve Jobs grew up. Not only as one of the largest tenants in the area and as a large employer, but also as the city's biggest taxpayer. The company that once started in a garage here had transformed the entire neighborhood. The parks at the new campus therefore had to celebrate the local environment, and Steve Jobs wanted them to be based on nearby Stanford University. Jobs appreciated the park layout here, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who is considered the founder of American landscape architecture. Steve Jobs also appreciated the extensive hiking trails that surrounded the Stanford Dish, right behind the university. For the design of the parks, reclaimed landscape architect Laurie Allen was hired, who relocated to Palo Alto for 4 months in order to get a real feel for the local environment. His park design is a representation of the California landscape. On one hand, there is a wide meadow extending from the building, which can be used for events and resembles campus parkland at Stanford University. There are also 2 freestanding cafes here. Adjacent behind are several rows of an orchard containing over 800 fruit trees, referencing the Bay Area's countless fruit plantations. And then there is this man-made pond, again referencing the waters of the surrounding area, which enable all the greenery to exist. California's two largest rivers flow all across the state until they ultimately meet right here in the Bay Area before flowing into the ocean. It is a fascinating piece of landscape architecture that symbolically reflects this unique region of the country. And all of this is surrounded by different types of oak trees that structure the landscape both inside and outside of the building, creating a natural feeling parkland that connects the different parts of the building with pathways. For the planting of the trees, Apple hired the arborist Dave Muffley, who had previously planted the Stanford dish that Jobs wanted to replicate.
Today, about 20% of the space is landscaping. Most of it is a big asphalt parking lot. We want to completely change this, and we want to make 80% of it landscape. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to put most of the parking underground.
Accessible through these tunnels is the underground parking garage, which was custom designed with the same level of detail as the main building. Johnny Ive's design team created a custom signage system with the information displayed in white frames attached to the curved walls. And the traffic lights are arranged horizontally and reference the icons in the corner of applications in Apple's operating system. But because the underground space is not quite enough, Apple also had to build two parking garages at the southern end of the campus. Located in the top left corner is the Apple Park Fitness Center. On the outside, there are facilities for team sports like volleyball, basketball, and soccer, while inside there is a full fitness studio accessible to Apple employees only. Located on the other side of the park is a building that regularly is open for outsiders during Apple's press events at the Steve Jobs Theater. However, only the entrance pavilion is visible above ground, because the actual auditorium itself is completely underground. The theater is used for the presentation of new products by the company and can seat 1,000 people. The award-winning pavilion above ground stands out for the fact that there are no support columns. The roof is made of a light carbon fiber panel, and the entire structural load is carried directly by the glass. It's the largest structure in the world that is solely supported by glass, and the electrical wiring and sprinkler pipes are completely hidden along the thin silicon joints between the curved glass panels. Inside, there is a glass spiral elevator that rotates in such a way that only one door is necessary. It is just one out of countless details that were specifically created, such as custom-designed elevator buttons, door handles, or even specially designed pizza boxes for the cafe, which Apple even patented. Apple Park is a space with no compromises. But implementing the idea of a collaborative space so radically led to issues for cases where the reality required different setups. With the needs of certain teams not matching that overall vision, Apple had to build separate buildings for research and development departments. These are departments where confidentiality is especially important, and the resulting building doesn't follow the open, transparent idea of the main building. The roofs are filled with AC ventilation shafts instead of solar panels as present on the rest of the campus. The offices are also arranged in a more traditional way instead of the open concept. And surface-level parking is available in front of the rectangular office towers. The magnificent round building is by no means sufficient for Apple, and instead of using the large space effectively, new buildings are built nearby with less ambitious design approaches.
And it's pretty amazing building. It's a little like a spaceship landed.
Perhaps Steve Jobs' comparison of the building with a spaceship applies to much more than its visual appearance. Apple Park is an uncompromising attempt to create an isolated island that bears little relation to the life and troubles of the adjacent streets and communities. Apple operates its own private bus service to shuttle employees through the congested Silicon Valley. The company also operates its own private medical centers in Cupertino, exclusively for employees. While Apple's attempt to create an isolated environment for its employees is rife with benefits, it might be even more forward-thinking if the company had instead created a campus in an environment where interaction with local businesses is encouraged, where environmentally friendly short commutes would be possible, and where the success of their campus could rub off on the environment and integrate into modern city planning solutions. Perhaps the goal wasn't to create the most practical campus, but rather to create a building that embodies some form of perfection, that is intended to set standards within the company and display the approach for how the company should develop its products. More than anything, Steve Jobs approached this campus not as an architect or a productivity expert, but as a storyteller, aware of the power a well-told story has to inspire.
I think we do have a shot of building the best office building in the world. And I really do think architecture students will come here to see this.
It shows that architecture can do many different things. And while this massive building is made to symbolize and nurture a specific design approach, in my next video I will look at a very different piece of real estate, as I will be exploring the Las Vegas Strip. Similar to this video, I have mapped out the area in 3D, and I will be exploring how two companies alone have secured control over a large part of the casino business in Las Vegas. The video will go live on YouTube in a couple of weeks, but you can already watch it right now on Nebula, where I'll be posting all my videos first. Now here's what's really exciting about this. Nebula is not some sponsor that reached out. It is a streaming service I am building together with other YouTubers and podcasters. And what started as a small passion project has turned into a massive success that allows us to create way more ambitious projects than we could on YouTube.
The Nighthawk carried no defenses.
I don't like the red. Why? I would get this in gray. What? I know.
Special forces raided the compound.
Russian soldiers began massing up on the border with Ukraine.
If you sign up using my link on screen right now, you will get a $10 discount a year, which means it will cost you only $3.33 each month. That way, you will support the ambitious project that me and my friends have embarked on of building our very own streaming site. Thank you so much for watching.